"Cover that tattoo immediately," the judge commanded, his voice echoing through the packed courtroom. "This is a place of law, not a biker rally." The smirks, the whispers, the dismissive glances from everyone present made it clear what they thought of the woman standing before them. But when she slowly rolled up her sleeve to reveal what lay beneath, the confident expression on Judge Hamilton's face began to change. What started as a simple disorderly conduct hearing was about to become something that would be whispered about in legal circles for decades to come. The tattoo on her arm wasn't just ink. It was a coded message that only a select few would recognize. And when the judge finally understood what he was looking at, his entire worldview shattered in that federal courtroom. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of hidden warriors living among us speak to you, consider subscribing to Silent Heroes Stories for more tales of extraordinary people hiding in plain sight. The morning rain drummed against the windows of the federal district courthouse as Marina Cross entered through the security checkpoint. She moved with quiet efficiency, placing her belongings in the plastic bins while courthouse security barely glanced at her appearance. Dark jeans, simple black jacket, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Nothing about her suggested she was anything more than another defendant facing minor charges. The disorderly conduct citation stemmed from an incident 3 nights earlier at Murphy's Bar, where Marina had intervened when 4 college students were harassing an elderly veteran. The confrontation had escalated quickly, resulting in 2 students requiring medical attention and Marina spending the night in jail. Docket number 47B, The People versus Marina Cross, the bailiff announced as Marina approached the defendant's table. Charge of disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, and assault. Judge Theodore Hamilton looked down from his elevated bench with the expression of a man accustomed to processing the city's minor criminals with efficient disdain. At 63, he had seen every type of defendant imaginable, and he prided himself on maintaining order in his courtroom through strict adherence to protocol and respect for authority. Marina's public defender, a harried-looking young man named David Chen, shuffled through papers as he whispered hurried instructions about court procedures and appropriate responses. Marina listened politely, but said little, her attention focused on the judge and the courtroom dynamics around her. "Ms. Cross," Judge Hamilton began, consulting his docket, "you stand accused of causing a disturbance at a licensed establishment, resulting in injuries to multiple individuals. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Marina replied clearly. Judge Hamilton's eyes narrowed as he noticed something that had escaped the security screening. The edge of a tattoo was visible where Marina's jacket sleeve met her wrist, dark lines of ink that disappeared beneath the fabric. "Ms. Cross," the judge interrupted the proceeding, his voice sharp with disapproval. "This court maintains certain standards of appearance and decorum. I'm going to ask you to cover that tattoo immediately. This is a place of law and justice, not a biker rally or tattoo parlor." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the gallery. Several courthouse regulars exchanged knowing glances, anticipating another lecture about respect for judicial authority. Marina looked down at her wrist, then back up at Judge Hamilton. "Your Honor, the tattoo is not visible when my jacket is properly positioned. Nevertheless," Hamilton continued, "I find it inappropriate for this setting. Please ensure it remains covered throughout these proceedings." The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Sarah Williams, watched the exchange with growing interest. Something about Marina's bearing suggested this wasn't going to be a routine hearing. Marina adjusted her jacket sleeve as requested, ensuring the tattoo remained hidden while the proceedings continued. Judge Hamilton seemed satisfied with this small assertion of his authority and returned his attention to the case files before him. "Ms. Cross," Ada Williams began, rising from the prosecution table, "the state alleges that on the evening of November 15th, you initiated a physical altercation at Murphy's Bar that resulted in injuries to 4 individuals, Can you explain to the court what led to this confrontation?" Marina stood, her posture remaining perfectly straight as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, I was having dinner alone when I observed 4 young men harassing an elderly gentleman at the bar. They were making derogatory comments about his military service and attempting to remove his veteran's cap." "And this prompted you to become involved. How?" Williams pressed. "I asked them politely to leave the gentleman alone," Marina replied. "When they refused and became more aggressive, I intervened." Judge Hamilton leaned forward, his expression skeptical. "Ms. Cross, are you claiming that you, a single woman, successfully fought off 4 college-aged men?" "I defended myself and the veteran when the situation escalated beyond verbal harassment, Your Honor." The prosecutor consulted her notes. "According to the police report, 2 of the alleged victims required emergency medical treatment. One suffered a dislocated shoulder, another a broken wrist. These are serious injuries, Ms. Cross." Marina's expression remained unchanged. "They sustained those injuries when they chose to make the confrontation physical." "Your Honor," David Chen interjected, "my client was clearly acting in defense of another person. The elderly gentleman in question was 78 years old and suffering from mobility issues." Judge Hamilton waved dismissively. "Mr. Chen, your client's alleged motivations don't excuse the excessive force used against 4 younger, stronger individuals. The injuries described suggest training in combat techniques." "I have some experience in self-defense," Marina acknowledged. "What kind of experience?" Williams asked, sensing an opportunity. Marina hesitated for the first time since entering the courtroom. "I've had training in personal protection and conflict de-escalation." "What type of training specifically?" the prosecutor pressed. Before Marina could respond, Judge Hamilton interrupted with growing irritation. "Ms. Cross, I'm going to ask you again to properly secure that sleeve. The tattoo is becoming visible again, and I find it highly inappropriate for these proceedings." Marina looked down at her wrist, where the edge of the intricate design was indeed showing beneath her jacket cuff. The tattoo appeared to be military in nature, though the specific details remained hidden. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "the sleeve moves naturally as I gesture. I'm not intentionally displaying anything inappropriate." "Then perhaps you should have considered appropriate courtroom attire before appearing in my court," Hamilton snapped. "This is exactly the kind of unprofessional appearance that undermines respect for the judicial process." Several members of the gallery began to murmur among themselves. The elderly veteran from Murphy's Bar, Harold Morrison, sat in the back row with his adult daughter, both watching the proceedings with growing concern. Ada Williams seized on the judge's obvious irritation. "Your Honor, perhaps Ms. Cross's disregard for courtroom protocol reflects the same disrespect for authority that led to the incident at Murphy's Bar." Marina's jaw tightened slightly, but she maintained her composed demeanor. "I have nothing but respect for legitimate authority and the judicial process." "Then you'll have no problem following simple instructions about appropriate courtroom appearance," Judge Hamilton declared. As Marina reached to adjust her sleeve once more, Harold Morrison stood up in the gallery. "Your Honor, if I may—" "Mr. Morrison, please remain seated," the bailiff warned. "But she saved my life," the elderly veteran called out, his voice carrying across the courtroom. "Those boys weren't just harassing me. They were trying to rob me, and when I resisted—" "Mr. Morrison, you are out of order," Judge Hamilton declared, his gavel coming down sharply. "Bailiff, please escort Mr. Morrison from the courtroom if he cannot remain silent." Marina turned to look at Harold, their eyes meeting briefly across the courtroom. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that transcended the formal proceedings surrounding them. The bailiff approached Harold's row, but before he could reach the elderly veteran, Marina made a decision that would change everything. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying a new note of authority, "perhaps it would be helpful if the court understood exactly what these tattoos represent." The courtroom fell into complete silence at Marina's words. Judge Hamilton's expression shifted from irritation to surprise, while Ada Williams paused mid-sentence, her prepared questions forgotten. "Ms. Cross," Judge Hamilton said slowly, "I've instructed you twice to keep that tattoo covered. Are you deliberately defying a direct order from this court?" Marina met his gaze directly. "Your Honor, I'm offering to provide context that may be relevant to these proceedings. But if you prefer to continue without understanding what you're actually looking at, I'll comply with your instructions." The challenge in her voice was subtle, but unmistakable. David Chen shifted nervously beside her, clearly unsure whether his client was helping or destroying her own case. "What kind of context?" Williams interjected, her prosecutor's instincts sensing potential evidence. Marina slowly began to roll up her sleeve, revealing more of the intricate tattoo design. What had appeared to be simple military imagery from a distance resolved into something far more specific and detailed. The tattoo was a masterwork of precision and symbolism. At its center was a trident overlaid with wings, but surrounding it were elements that spoke to those with knowledge of special operations. Coordinates, dates, and symbols that were definitely not decorative choices. Harold Morrison, still standing despite the bailiff's proximity, gasped audibly. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered, "those are DevGru markings." "Mr. Morrison, you will be silent or you will be removed," Judge Hamilton warned, but his attention was now fixed on Marina's arm. "DevGru?" Ada Williams asked, clearly unfamiliar with the term. "Development Group," Harold explained before the bailiff could silence him. "Naval Special Warfare Development Group. SEAL Team 6. The murmur that ran through the courtroom was immediate and electric. Judge Hamilton's confident demeanor began to waver as he studied the tattoo more closely. Marina continued rolling up her sleeve, revealing additional elements that made the true nature of the artwork undeniable. Small numbers and letters were incorporated into the design. Coordinates that corresponded to specific operations, dates that matched classified missions, and symbols that only someone who had actually served in the units would know to include. "Ms. Cross," Judge Hamilton said, his voice losing some of its earlier authority, "are you claiming to be a former member of Naval Special Warfare?" "I'm not claiming anything, Your Honor. I'm showing you what you demanded to see." David Chen leaned closer to his client, whispering urgently, "Marina, why didn't you tell me about your military background? This changes everything about your case." "Because my service record is sealed," Marina replied quietly. "And until now, it wasn't relevant to a simple disorderly conduct charge." Ada Williams approached the defendant's table, studying the tattoo with growing recognition. As a federal prosecutor, she had worked with military personnel before and understood the significance of what she was seeing. "Your Honor," Williams said carefully, "if Ms. Cross is indeed a former member of DevGru, that would certainly explain her ability to neutralize 4 attackers. These are individuals trained in the most advanced combat techniques known to the military." Judge Hamilton removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly as he processed this unexpected development. When he looked up again, his entire demeanor had shifted from dismissive authority to uncertain caution. "Ms. Cross, if what you're suggesting is accurate, why didn't you or your counsel raise this information earlier in the proceedings?" Marina's response was measured and precise. "Your Honor, my military service is classified at levels that require specific authorization to discuss. I was prepared to accept the charges rather than compromise operational security. However, since the court has made my tattoos a central issue, I felt it necessary to provide proper context." The elderly veteran, Harold Morrison, spoke up once more, his voice filled with recognition and respect. "Judge, that woman didn't just save me from some college kids. She saved me from 4 men who were armed and dangerous. I saw how they moved, how they coordinated. They weren't just drunk students." Before the bailiff could silence him again, Harold continued, "And the way she handled them, I served 2 tours in Vietnam, and I've never seen anything like it. She neutralized all 4 of them without seriously hurting anyone. That takes the kind of training they don't teach in civilian self-defense classes." Judge Hamilton found himself in unfamiliar territory. In 30 years on the bench, he had never encountered a defendant whose background fundamentally challenged his initial assessment of both the person and the case. "Ms. Cross," he said slowly, "perhaps you could explain to the court exactly what happened at Murphy's Bar that night." Marina nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor. But first, you should know that this wasn't a random bar fight. Those 4 men had been tracking Mr. Morrison for 3 days. The courtroom's atmosphere had completely transformed. Where minutes before there had been dismissive chatter and routine legal proceedings, now there was an electric tension as everyone absorbed the implications of Marina's revelation. "Ms. Cross," Judge Hamilton said, his voice noticeably more respectful, "you stated that these men had been tracking Mr. Morrison for 3 days. How could you possibly know that?" Marina glanced at Harold Morrison, who nodded slightly from his position in the gallery. "Because I had been tracking them, Your Honor. Mr. Morrison is under protective surveillance." Ada Williams stepped forward, her prosecutorial instincts fully engaged. "Protective surveillance by whom? Are you claiming to be working in some official capacity?" "I work for a private security firm that specializes in veteran protection services," Marina explained. "Mr. Morrison contacted our company after receiving threats related to his testimony in an upcoming federal case." Judge Hamilton leaned forward, his earlier irritation replaced by genuine concern. "What kind of federal case?" Harold Morrison spoke up again, this time without objection from the court. "Defense contractor fraud, Your Honor. I witnessed some things during my time working as a civilian consultant at Norfolk Naval Base, things that certain people don't want made public." The pieces were beginning to fall into place for everyone in the courtroom. What had appeared to be a simple bar fight was revealing itself as something far more serious. "Your Honor," David Chen interjected, finding his voice, "if my client was acting in her professional capacity as a security specialist, that fundamentally changes the nature of these charges." Marina continued her explanation with clinical precision. "The 4 individuals who approached Mr. Morrison at Murphy's Bar were not college students. They were private contractors hired to intimidate him into withdrawing his testimony. When verbal intimidation failed, they escalated to physical threats." Ada Williams consulted her notes with growing alarm. "The police report lists them as students from the local university." "Check their identification more carefully," Marina suggested. "The student IDs were sophisticated forgeries, but they won't withstand detailed scrutiny. I suspect you'll find that none of them have any actual enrollment records." Judge Hamilton was now studying Marina with the attention he typically reserved for complex legal precedents. "Ms. Cross, you seem remarkably well informed about the details of this alleged conspiracy." "I photograph everything, Your Honor. My training requires comprehensive documentation of potential threats." Marina reached into her jacket pocket, producing a small digital device. "I have approximately 4 hours of surveillance footage from the 3 days preceding the incident." The revelation sent another wave of murmurs through the gallery. Several journalists who had been covering the routine court docket began taking more serious notes. "Furthermore," Marina continued, "I have audio recordings of the conversations between these men and their handler. Conversations that explicitly discuss methods for convincing Mr. Morrison to reconsider his cooperation with federal investigators. Otto Williams exchanged glances with Judge Hamilton. Both legal professionals understood that what had begun as a minor criminal matter was now potentially evidence in a much larger federal investigation. "Your Honor," Williams said carefully, "I believe this case needs to be referred to federal authorities immediately. If Ms. Cross's allegations are accurate, we're looking at witness intimidation and conspiracy charges that fall well outside this court's jurisdiction." Marina nodded approvingly. "I've already provided copies of all evidence to the appropriate federal agencies. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres can verify my credentials and the ongoing investigation." Judge Hamilton removed his glasses again, this time to rub his temples as he processed the complete reversal of his understanding. "Ms. Cross, why didn't you identify yourself as a federal contractor when you were arrested?" "Because my cover identity as a civilian allows me to operate more effectively in protecting clients like Mr. Morrison. Revealing my background prematurely could have compromised ongoing surveillance operations." Harold Morrison stood up once more, this time addressing Judge Hamilton directly. "Your Honor, this woman risked her own safety and her professional cover to protect me from 4 trained operatives who meant to do serious harm. She could have let them take me, maintained her cover, and continued the surveillance. Instead, she chose to act." The elderly veteran's voice carried the weight of someone who understood the true cost of such decisions. "She didn't just save my life that night. She saved the testimony that's going to put some very dangerous people in prison." Judge Hamilton set down his gavel with unusual gentleness. "Ms. Cross, it appears this court owes you an apology. Your actions were clearly justified, and your discretion in handling sensitive information has been exemplary." Marina remained standing at attention. "Thank you, Your Honor. I was simply doing my job." "A job that requires extraordinary skills and considerable personal risk," the judge acknowledged. "Skills that I now understand are reflected in those tattoos I was so quick to dismiss." As if summoned by Marina's mention of her name, the courtroom doors opened, and a woman in a dark business suit entered with purposeful strides. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres moved with the same quiet authority that Marina displayed, her credentials already visible as she approached the bench. "Your Honor," Agent Torres announced, "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe this court is currently hearing a case involving one of our federal contractors." Judge Hamilton looked between Marina and the FBI agent with growing understanding. "Agent Torres, I presume you're here regarding Ms. Cross?" "Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cross has been operating under federal authority in protection of a key witness in Operation Silent Harbor, a joint FBI naval intelligence investigation into defense contractor fraud." The formal confirmation of Marina's status sent another wave of recognition through the courtroom. Otto Williams immediately understood the implications for her case. "Agent Torres," Williams interjected, "if Ms. Cross was operating under federal authority, why wasn't this information provided during booking?" "Because maintaining her cover identity was critical to ongoing operations," Torres replied. "Until Mr. Morrison's safety was compromised, we needed Ms. Cross to remain invisible to the subjects of our investigation." Marina stepped forward slightly. "Agent Torres, I assume my cover is now fully blown?" "As of 0600 this morning, yes. The 4 operatives you neutralized at Murphy's Bar were identified through facial recognition as employees of Blackwater Solutions, a private military contractor currently under federal investigation." Harold Morrison spoke up from the gallery, his voice filled with vindication. "I told you those weren't college students. They moved like professionals." Agent Torres nodded in Harold's direction. "Mr. Morrison's instincts were correct. These men were sent specifically to prevent his testimony in the federal case against Blackwater and their Pentagon contacts." Judge Hamilton was now completely absorbed in the unfolding revelation. Agent Torres, what exactly was the nature of the threats against Mr. Morrison? Blackwater Solutions has been systematically overcharging the Navy for security services while providing substandard protection to naval facilities. Mr. Morrison witnessed several incidents where their negligence directly endangered military personnel. Marina added, the threats escalated when Mr. Morrison refused an initial bribe to modify his testimony. That's when my firm was contracted to provide protection. And your firm is? Williams asked. Guardian Angel Securities, Agent Torres answered. A private company that employs former special operations personnel for high-risk protection assignments. All of their operatives maintain security clearances and work closely with federal law enforcement. The implications were staggering. What had appeared to be a simple assault case was actually the culmination of a complex federal investigation involving military contractor fraud, witness intimidation, and private military operatives. Ms. Cross, Judge Hamilton said, his earlier arrogance completely absent, your actions at Murphy's Bar prevented a serious federal crime. More than that, Agent Torres added. Her intervention allowed us to capture all 4 operatives alive. Under interrogation, they've provided evidence that will significantly strengthen our case against Blackwater and their Pentagon collaborators. Marina remained at attention, but her posture now reflected pride rather than defensive caution. The mission was to protect Mr. Morrison and gather intelligence. Both objectives were accomplished. David Chen, who had been silent through much of this revelation, finally found his voice. Your Honor, given this information, I move for immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. Motion granted, Judge Hamilton replied without hesitation. Ms. Cross, this court formally apologizes for the misunderstanding and thanks you for your service to both country and witness protection. Agent Torres stepped forward. Your Honor, we'd also like to commend Mr. Morrison for his courage in coming forward, despite significant personal risk. His testimony will help ensure that military personnel receive the protection they deserve. Harold Morrison wiped tears from his eyes as the courtroom erupted in spontaneous applause. The elderly veteran who had been dismissed as a victim was now recognized as a hero, and the woman who had saved him was revealed as a guardian angel in disguise. Ms. Cross, Judge Hamilton continued, I want to personally apologize for my comments about your tattoos. I now understand that they represent honors earned through extraordinary service. Marina allowed herself a small smile. Thank you, Your Honor. Though I hope this experience might encourage more careful consideration before judging others based on appearances. The rebuke was gentle but unmistakable, and Judge Hamilton accepted it with appropriate humility. Point taken, Ms. Cross. This court has learned a valuable lesson today about the dangers of prejudgment. As the formal proceedings concluded, Agent Torres approached Marina at the defendant's table. Agent Torres opened her briefcase and retrieved a classified folder marked with federal security stamps. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to provide additional context about the scope of this investigation. Judge Hamilton nodded, his earlier dismissive attitude completely replaced by professional attention. Please proceed, Agent Torres. Operation Silent Harbor has been investigating Blackwater Solutions for 18 months. What began as routine auditing of defense contracts revealed a systematic pattern of fraud, intimidation, and in some cases direct threats against military personnel who attempted to report safety violations. Marina remained standing as Torres continued the briefing, her presence now commanding the same respect as the federal agents. Mr. Morrison's case is particularly significant because he witnessed multiple incidents where Blackwater's negligence directly led to security breaches at Norfolk Naval Base. When he attempted to report these incidents through proper channels, he was threatened, then approached with bribery offers. Harold Morrison spoke from the gallery, his voice stronger now that his credibility had been established. They offered me $50,000 to remember things differently about what I saw. When Mr. Morrison refused the bribe, Torres continued, Blackwater escalated to direct intimidation. That's when Guardian Angel Securities was contracted to provide protection. Ada Williams looked up from the federal documents she had been reviewing. Agent Torres, how many other witnesses are under similar protection? 17 federal witnesses across 6 states, Torres replied, all with similar stories of attempted bribery, followed by escalating threats when they refused to modify their testimony. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear to everyone in the courtroom. This wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a coordinated campaign to silence military whistleblowers. Ms. Cross, Judge Hamilton asked, how long have you been working this particular assignment? 6 months, Your Honor. I was specifically selected because my DevGru background makes me capable of handling trained operatives like the one sent after Mr. Morrison. Marina's matter-of-fact delivery of this information underscored the serious nature of the threats they had been facing. Judge Hamilton was beginning to understand that his courtroom had become the setting for the resolution of a much larger federal case. Agent Torres, he continued, what can you tell us about these 4 men who were arrested in Murphy's Bar? All 4 are former military contractors with extensive combat experience. Michael Stevens, former Army Rangers. David Park, ex-Marine Force Recon. James Walker and Thomas Reed, both former private security operatives with deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. Marina added, they weren't sent to simply intimidate Mr. Morrison. Their instructions were to extract him from Murphy's Bar and transport him to a secondary location for enhanced persuasion. The euphemism sent a chill through the courtroom. Harold Morrison's daughter, who had been sitting quietly beside her father, gasped audibly at the implication. Enhanced persuasion? Williams repeated. Torture, Marina clarified bluntly. They had zip ties, duct tape, and injectable sedatives. This wasn't going to be a conversation. Agent Torres nodded grimly. Under interrogation, Stevens admitted that they had been instructed to use whatever methods necessary to change Mr. Morrison's testimony. If persuasion failed, they were authorized to proceed to elimination. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Judge Hamilton removed his glasses once more, but this time it was to process the magnitude of what had nearly occurred in his jurisdiction. Ms. Cross, he said quietly, you didn't just prevent an assault. You prevented a kidnapping and potential murder. Yes, Your Honor, which is why my response was calibrated to neutralize the threat completely while keeping all 4 operatives alive for interrogation. David Chen finally found his voice again. Your Honor, my client's actions saved not only Mr. Morrison's life, but also preserved crucial evidence for a federal investigation. Agent Torres confirmed this assessment. The intelligence we've gathered from these 4 prisoners has already led to the arrest of 3 Blackwater executives and 2 Pentagon officials. Mr. Morrison's testimony, combined with the evidence Ms. Cross helped us obtain, will likely result in the largest defense contractor fraud conviction in recent history. Marina allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The mission was to protect the witness and gather intelligence on the threat network. Both objectives were exceeded. Judge Hamilton stood, a gesture of respect that surprised everyone in the courtroom. Ms. Cross, this court formally recognizes your extraordinary service. Your actions prevented a serious federal crime and protected a citizen who was doing his civic duty despite considerable personal risk. He turned to address Harold Morrison directly. Mr. Morrison, your courage in coming forward despite these threats exemplifies the highest ideals of citizenship and military service. The elderly veteran stood as well, his bearing now reflecting the dignity he had earned through his ordeal. Thank you, Your Honor. I just did what any American should do when they see wrongdoing. As the formal proceedings concluded, the courtroom began to empty, but the atmosphere remained charged with the gravity of what had been revealed. Marina gathered her belongings while Agent Torres coordinated with court security about the transfer of evidence. Ms. Cross, Judge Hamilton approached the defendant's table, his demeanor completely transformed from the authoritative figure who had dismissed her hours earlier. "I owe you a personal apology. My behavior was inexcusable." Marina looked up from securing her jacket, the tattoo still visible on her arm. "Your Honor, you responded based on limited information. We all make assumptions." "That's generous of you, but inappropriate assumptions from the bench can have serious consequences," Hamilton replied. "In 30 years of practicing law, I've never been more wrong about someone's character." Harold Morrison approached with his daughter Sarah, both wanting to express their gratitude personally. "Marina, I don't have words for what you've done for my family," Harold said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did the hard part, Mr. Morrison. Standing up to corruption takes courage. I just provided security." Sarah Morrison stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "You saved my father's life. Those men would have killed him, wouldn't they?" Agent Torres, overhearing the conversation, nodded grimly. Based on their equipment and instructions, elimination was definitely on the table if intimidation failed. The weight of that revelation settled over the small group. Marina had prevented not just an assault, but a murder disguised as witness intimidation. "What happens next?" David Chen asked Agent Torres. "Ms. Cross returns to active duty with Guardian Angel Securities. Mr. Morrison's testimony proceeds as scheduled, now with additional protection protocols. And Blackwater Solutions faces federal prosecution for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder." Judge Hamilton shook his head in amazement. "To think this all started because I was offended by a tattoo." Marina rolled down her sleeve, preparing to leave. "Your Honor, those tattoos represent 15 years of service to this country. Every mark tells a story of missions completed and lives saved." "I understand that now," Hamilton replied. "And I hope you'll accept my commitment to never again judge someone based on their appearance rather than their actions." As Marina moved toward the exit, other courtroom observers approached to express their thanks and admiration. Word was already spreading through the courthouse about the dramatic revelation that had transformed a routine hearing into a federal case. Agent Torres walked alongside Marina as they headed for the exit. "Marina, I have to ask, when you saw those 4 operatives approaching Morrison at the bar, did you know immediately what was happening?" Marina paused at the courthouse doors. "The moment they entered Murphy's, their movement patterns gave them away. They moved like a tactical team, not drunk college students. Everything about their approach screamed professional operation." "And you engaged them anyway, knowing you'd blow your cover?" Mr. Morrison's safety was the primary mission. Maintaining cover was secondary to protecting the witness. Harold Morrison, who had been walking behind them, caught up as they reached the courthouse steps. "Marina, I want you to know something. In Vietnam, we had a saying, 'Angels wear many faces.' Today I learned that sometimes they wear tattoos and get arrested for doing the right thing." Marina smiled genuinely for the first time since entering the courthouse. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. That means more than you know." As they stood on the courthouse steps, the morning sun breaking through the clouds, Agent Torres received a call on her secure phone. After a brief conversation, she turned to the group with satisfaction. "Blackwater's CEO just agreed to a plea deal. Mr. Morrison's testimony won't be needed after all. The case is effectively closed." As the group prepared to part ways on the courthouse steps, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the curb. From the lead vehicle emerged 3 men in military dress uniforms, their bearing immediately recognizable to Marina as active-duty Special Operations personnel. "Commander Cross," the lead officer called out, approaching with crisp military precision. "Captain James Sullivan, SEAL Team 4. We came as soon as we heard." Marina snapped to attention instinctively. "Captain Sullivan, this is unexpected." "Ma'am, when word reached Norfolk that one of our former DevGru operators had been arrested while protecting a naval witness, Admiral Richardson sent us to ensure you received appropriate support." Judge Hamilton watched this exchange with growing awareness of the respect Marina commanded within the military community. The 3 SEALs treated her not just as a former colleague, but as a revered veteran whose service continued beyond active duty. "Captain, the situation has been resolved," Marina replied. "Agent Torres and the court have cleared up the misunderstanding." Captain Sullivan glanced at Agent Torres, who showed her credentials. "Agent Torres, thank you for ensuring Commander Cross received fair treatment. Her actions at Murphy's Bar have been noted at the highest levels of Naval Special Warfare Command." Harold Morrison stepped forward, still processing the continued revelations about Marina's background. "Excuse me, Captain, but did you say Commander? I thought she was a contractor." "Sir, Commander Cross was one of the most decorated DevGru operators in the unit's history. 12 years of active duty, 3 tours with Special Operations Forces, and more classified commendations than I'm authorized to discuss in public." The elderly veteran's eyes widened with recognition and respect. "Marina, you never told me you were an officer." Marina remained modest despite the praise. "My rank isn't relevant to protection duties, Mr. Morrison. What matters is keeping you safe." Captain Sullivan continued, "Ma'am, Admiral Richardson asked me to deliver this personally." He handed Marina an official envelope bearing the seal of Naval Special Warfare Command. Marina opened the envelope, reading the contents silently before looking up with surprise. "Captain, this is unexpected." "What is it?" Agent Torres asked. Marina showed the document to the group. "A formal commendation for actions taken while supporting federal law enforcement operations. It will be added to my service record." Judge Hamilton shook his head in continued amazement. "Ms. Cross, Commander Cross, you continue to surprise us all." One of the other SEALs stepped forward, addressing Harold Morrison directly. "Sir, we want you to know that what you're doing, testifying against contractor fraud, protects every service member who depends on that equipment. Your courage matters to all of us." Harold straightened with pride. "Thank you, son. I serve too, and I know what it means when the gear doesn't work like it's supposed to." Captain Sullivan turned back to Marina. "Commander, the Admiral also wanted me to inform you that Guardian Angel Securities has been approved for additional Navy contracts. Your work has impressed the right people." Marina nodded professionally. "Thank you, Captain. Please give the Admiral my regards." As the SEALs prepared to depart, Captain Sullivan offered one final comment. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, the Brotherhood never forgets. What you did for Mr. Morrison reflects the honor of the teams, even in civilian life." The 3 SEALs departed with the same precision with which they had arrived, leaving the group on the courthouse steps processing yet another layer of Marina's remarkable background. Agent Torres broke the silence. "Marina, I have to ask, how many people know about your military background?" "Very few. That's intentional. Anonymity is an asset in protection work." Judge Hamilton approached Marina one final time. "Commander Cross, this court is honored to have served, however briefly, in recognizing your continued service to this country." Marina accepted the recognition with grace. "Thank you, Your Honor. Justice was served today, and that's what matters." 3 weeks later, Marina sat in the offices of Guardian Angel Securities, reviewing case files for new protection assignments. The events at the courthouse had generated significant attention within federal law enforcement circles, leading to an unprecedented increase in requests for their services. Her supervisor, former Marine Colonel Patricia Hayes, entered the office with a satisfied expression. "Marina, I just got off the phone with the Justice Department. The Blackwater case officially closed this morning. Complete plea agreements across the board." Marina looked up from her files. "What about the Pentagon officials?" "Full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentences. The entire network has been dismantled. Colonel Hayes sat down across from Marina's desk. More importantly, Congress has announced new oversight legislation for defense contractors. What you did at Murphy's Bar is going to protect service members for years to come. The wider impact of that night's events continued to unfold in ways Marina hadn't anticipated. The case had become a catalyst for reform throughout the defense contracting industry. There's something else, Hayes continued. Judge Hamilton called personally. He wants to nominate you for a Civilian Service Award. Marina shook her head. That's not necessary, Colonel. I was doing my job. Maybe, but the judge seems to think you taught him something important about prejudgment and assumptions. He's also implemented new courtroom protocols about respecting service members and veterans. Through the window, Marina could see Harold Morrison arriving for his weekly security briefing. Despite the case being closed, he had insisted on maintaining some protection protocols until all the convicted contractors were sentenced. Harold entered the office with his characteristic dignity, now enhanced by the respect he had earned as a federal witness. "Marina, how are you doing?" "Very well, Mr. Morrison." "How are you adjusting to life without constant surveillance?" Harold chuckled. "It's strange, actually. I got so used to having a guardian angel watching over me that I almost miss it." Colonel Hayes stood to shake Harold's hand. "Mr. Morrison, your testimony helped convict 8 people for defense contractor fraud. That's 8 fewer threats to military personnel safety." "I'm just glad it's over," Harold replied. "Though I have to say, meeting Marina made the whole ordeal worthwhile. I learned that heroes don't always look like what we expect." Marina smiled at the comment. "Mr. Morrison, you're the hero in this story. You stood up to corruption despite significant personal risk." "We both did what we had to do," Harold said diplomatically. "But I'll never forget watching those smug expressions disappear when you showed that tattoo in court." The memory brought smiles to all 3 faces. The dramatic revelation had become something of a legend within law enforcement circles, spawning discussions about hidden veterans and the assumptions people make about service members. Colonel Hayes pulled out a newspaper clipping. "Speaking of which, this might interest you both. Judge Hamilton gave an interview about reforming courtroom bias. He specifically mentioned learning to look beyond appearances to see true character." Marina read the headline. "Federal Judge Advocates for Veteran Recognition After Courtroom Revelation." "He's been getting requests from other judges about sensitivity training," Hayes added. "Your case is being used as an example in judicial education programs." Harold beamed with pride. "Marina, you're not just protecting individuals anymore. You're protecting the idea that veterans deserve respect regardless of how they look or where they're found." Agent Torres arrived for the scheduled case debriefing, carrying final paperwork from the federal investigation. "Good afternoon, everyone. I have the final statistics from Operation Silent Harbor." She spread documents across Marina's desk. 17 witnesses protected, 8 contractors convicted, 2 Pentagon officials sentenced, and approximately $40 million in fraudulent billing recovered. Marina studied the numbers with professional satisfaction. "And all witnesses remained safe throughout the process?" "Every single one. Your intervention at Murphy's Bar prevented what could have been a systematic elimination campaign against federal witnesses." The scope of what had been prevented was staggering. Marina's quick action had protected not just Harold Morrison, but potentially dozens of other witnesses across the country. Colonel Hayes stood, signaling the end of the briefing. "Marina, you have a choice to make. The Navy has offered you a consulting position for contractor oversight, or you can continue with Guardian Angel Securities." 6 months later, Marina stood before a packed auditorium at the Federal Judicial Center in Washington, D.C. Her presentation on Recognizing Hidden Heroes, Veterans in Civilian Life had drawn judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement officials from across the country. The assumption that veterans must look a certain way or behave according to stereotypes can prevent us from recognizing their continued service to our communities, Marina explained to the attentive audience. Sometimes the most decorated warriors are the ones quietly protecting others while asking for nothing in return. In the front row sat Judge Hamilton, now a vocal advocate for judicial reform and veteran awareness. Beside him, Harold Morrison wore a suit adorned with his Vietnam service pins, serving as a living example of the courage required to stand up for what's right. Marina clicked to the next slide, showing statistics from the Guardian Angel Security's expansion. In the past 6 months, we've successfully protected 43 federal witnesses, prevented 12 attempted intimidation campaigns, and provided evidence that led to 37 convictions for various forms of corruption. The audience murmured appreciatively as she continued, "But the real victory isn't in the numbers. It's in the understanding that heroism comes in many forms, often hidden beneath ordinary appearances." Agent Torres, now promoted to head the FBI's Witness Protection Coordination Division, nodded approvingly from the audience. The success of Operation Silent Harbor had led to her advancement and the creation of new protocols for protecting federal witnesses. After the presentation, Marina joined Harold and Judge Hamilton for a private reception. The three had formed an unlikely friendship built on mutual respect and shared commitment to justice. "Marina," Judge Hamilton said, "I want you to know that 17 judges have implemented new courtroom protocols based on our experience. We're training court personnel to recognize and honor veteran service regardless of appearance." Harold raised his glass of water in a toast. "To hidden heroes and the courage to see past our assumptions." Marina smiled, touching her jacket sleeve where her tattoo remained hidden but no longer secret. "To the understanding that true service doesn't end with discharge papers." Colonel Hayes approached their group with news. "Marina, I just received confirmation. The Pentagon has approved Guardian Angel Securities for a 5-year contract protecting military witnesses and their families. Your work has officially become part of national defense." The recognition was gratifying, but Marina understood that the real impact lay in the changed perceptions and reformed attitudes that had emerged from that morning in Judge Hamilton's courtroom. Later, as she prepared to leave Washington, Marina received a text message from one of her current protection assignments. "Package secure. Guardian Angel on duty. Just like you taught us." She smiled, knowing that her methods and philosophy were being passed on to a new generation of protectors. The tattoos on her arm might tell the story of her past service, but her current work was writing new chapters in the ongoing mission to protect those who needed defending. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of hidden heroes and second chances moved you, consider subscribing to Silent Heroes Stories for more tales of extraordinary people who prove that appearances can be deceiving and true character reveals itself in moments of crisis. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance, only to discover their hidden depths? Share your stories in the comments below. The world needs more examples of looking beyond surface assumptions to see the heroes among us.